Go. Hey, everybody. Uh, Welcome to the first in my series of interviews. Today I've got Nick Rundlett to discuss the ins and outs of sales positions. Um, Nick, go ahead and start off. Give us a little bit of background about yourself, your career, schmooze a minute.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, well, I think I was selling ever since I was a kid, and that started trading Pokemon cards in the neighborhood cul-de-sac, right? Graduating from there, going up into high school, I was selling candy, flipping bags of Skittles and candy bars and Jolly Ranchers and all that stuff. Going on to college, I was running my own business, buying and selling and trading precious metals. Ultimately, dropped out of college to pursue that and then found Praxis. And through Praxis, got an apprenticeship working at this company, Reliant Technology, where I was selling IT services and data storage solutions. And I did very well for myself there. I started off as an SDR, moved up. I was outpacing the next two SDRs by both quoted margin and number of leads within just 3 months of working there. So I was promoted to a manager position while also being an account executive. So I was managing 5 SDRs and hitting my quota. And before leaving, I ended up closing the largest sale in the company for the entire year with Lockheed Martin. So that was a good way to exit. Um, then I started another company in the same field, and then got 100K in revenue closed within 4 months of operation. And now I am working managing the sales organization at Toggle. So that is my bio in sales in a nutshell.
Excellent. You kind of sort of answered my first question as well. I was going to ask sort of, what got you into sales, but it appears that it's just been sort of ingrained in you from the start. Like you mentioned, the old days of hustling Pokemon cards on the playground.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
that's an experience a lot of us can relate to, and some of us
Totally.
more proficient than others. Um, I guess my next question would be like, what would your biggest, or maybe even your top three pieces of advice be for someone who either wanted to get good at sales for their own sake or was really serious about that as a potential career option?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would tell them that their success in sales is going to be completely dependent on their own personal development. And that there's very few other, if any, career paths where there's such a one-to-one correlation to like how you show up in your daily life and how your numbers are at the end of each month. Like getting up an hour earlier and going to the gym makes you an objectively better salesperson. You're going to show up with more energy. You're going to be a higher value person. So that's going to be reflected in your voice. So people are going to hear that on the phone, and 15% fewer people will hang up on you within the first 30 seconds. Right. So that's one, mindset kind of thing to have. Um, Another piece of advice, you're going to get rejected, but like if you make it past the first, call it 200 times of getting rejected, you're going to develop a superpower that is immunity to rejection. You won't care about it anymore. Because once someone has told you to eat shit and die in a fire, which literally happened to my coworker, like
Oof,
it's
bit of a
bad, but
harsh mellow.
yeah, well, some people have terrible days and then they take it out on salespeople. So, but like once that's happened to you and other stuff has happened to you and you live and you're totally fine, you just realize like, damn, it's getting told no is not that big of a deal. And that bleeds over into every other area of life, to include dating, to include business. Um, yeah, it's just everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, what do you think what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary? What separates someone from taking a very sort of linear, traditional career path in sales from someone who's going to just rise up the ranks in no time?
I think it might boil down to being proactive versus reactive in your own development, because you can be successful. You can be in the top 20% at your firm or company, and you can be doing well, if you just grind and you take the leads that are assigned to you, you take the opportunities that are handed to you, and you slowly improve almost on accident because you're not really like consciously going at it. And you can eventually be successful that way, but that's going to take you 20 years. Or you can go, fuck that. I'm going to read books. I'm going to work out. I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to get smarter. I'm going to get better. I'm going to go to seminars. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And slowly but surely, your first year of doing that, you'll be like, damn, I'm like way better off in life, not just in sales, but in life than I was that first year. 2, 3, 4, 5 years of doing that, and you'll have so much more confidence in your own ability and your own self-efficacy that, like, again, that's going to bleed through. The experience is going to bleed through on every sales call that you have with a potential prospect. You'll have gone through all of the most common objections 100 times, 100 different ways, and you'll know how to instantly respond to them. And it's just going to be this natural, organic thing. And once you get that good, people don't experience you as a salesperson anymore. People experience you as someone who's trying to help them solve problems. And that's because you've internalized that mindset and it's genuine. It's not anything that's forced. So that's the light at the end of the tunnel, is that you can actually be a useful person and you can feel and internalize the fact that you've come far and make a shit ton of money as a direct result of the work that you've put in on your own life.
Absolutely. And so the next question is, what differentiates the average day-to-day salesman from the stereotype, right? Like, we've all seen
Mm-hmm.
that skeezy stereotype of the used car salesman in a cheap suit and an awful tie.
Yeah.
What separates that from what actually happens on a sales floor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the stereotype exists, I think, from the like pre-information age, like pre-internet, where those types of people were able to actually get some like shiver of success because people weren't aware of like the overall of like the tactics and the psychological manipulation and so on. But now those people are failures. Like, those people are failure losers in the bottom 5% of any sales organization, and no one chooses to interact with them because sales as a profession is getting very competitive. You actually have to be solution oriented. You have to be able to think critically. You have to be able to empathize and listen to a prospect in order to help them solve a specific problem that your company's product or services can solve. So while the old stereotype is kind of like sitting there leaning back smoking a cigar with his suit being like, hey Toots, let me show you this Nissan on aisle 6, it's like that doesn't, that like almost doesn't happen anymore. But then B, going to the question of what does the average salesperson's day look like, they're doing the same routine tasks of picking up phones and making calls or smiling and greeting prospects when they come into the door. But the ones who are going to be most successful aren't pushy. They aren't obnoxious. They sure as fuck aren't manipulative, because people can smell that and they hate it. And if someone perceives that you're a shitty salesperson and you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, or that you're just trying to manipulate or trick them out of their money, they can go onto their phone and find 7 other businesses that sell the exact same thing that you do. You're fucked. You just lost the sale. So you don't get to do that anymore. That's the difference.
Yeah, I can imagine in the age of Yelp reviews, you only get away with that so long. I mean,
Yeah.
to take it to kind of shall we say, under the table example, even drug dealers online on the dark web, people post reviews. So even
Yeah.
in the skeeziest of businesses, even if you're a human trafficker, people will post bad reviews if you don't deliver the product.
Yeah.
And so
Oh my God.
it's kind of amazing the
Yeah.
way the definition of accountability is shifted in light of some of those developments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, how valuable are soft skills versus hard skills in what you do?
Well, I think that the soft skills probably encompass 90% of the actual value that I can provide a company. But um, I'm thinking as well, it depends on what the company needs and what your sales position is. Because in my case, that might not actually be true because it's actually useful that I know how to set up a sales funnel. It's useful that I know how to create a content library of emails and cold call scripts and training reference materials, etc. Those are all hard skills in sales. But the average like account executive or sales development representative, um, the quote unquote hard skills are like picking up a phone and writing English. Like that's that's important, but the real value that you're going to be able to give is through um, conveying with confidence and certainty that you can help someone solve a problem. Like,
Absolutely.
so it's all soft skills.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are your favorite and least favorite parts of the role? Like in, day-to-day life or even in big transactions, like what do you live for in this role and what do you think, oh, necessary evil, you know?
Yeah. Well, on the what do I live for side, I live for those customer interactions where I'm showing them a tool or solution and they're going like, yeah, yes, oh my god, this is exactly what I've needed. I am so excited. Thank you very much for your time today, Nick. I really appreciate it, and we'll definitely keep in touch. I hope we can do business. And then following up with that person all the way till it comes to close. It's like knowing that my profession has literally helped them solve a problem and like improve their lives. That's like the highlight of the day. What would I more than happily do without? Um, I can't think of like a super huge negative. One thing that's annoying are what I call tire kickers. These are people who are just kind of like vaguely curious, but there's 0% chance that they'll ever buy, but they still go ahead and fill out fake information on a form and waste your time. Um, it's just not cool. Like, so yeah, that might be like that's one answer.
Yeah, well, of your tire kickers, out of curiosity, like what do you think they fall into mostly? And I guess it could vary by industry, right? Like if
Mhm.
you have some really advanced scientific or product or something, you're probably going to get a lot of engineers sniffing up your alley, just trying to find out what your product can do and how they can use it. But
Mhm.
I'd imagine in some other products, you might get a lot of like journalists or something looking to sniff out information.
Yeah, it's almost completely random what their intentions are because sometimes they're competitors and they're just like, I wonder how you guys are running your sales funnel, but you'll never know in a million years because they're not going to identify themselves as a competitor and it's a throwaway email account. Um, Sometimes it's a college student doing a research project. Like we've had those kinds of inquiries, so it's really random.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, how do you best fight burnout in a sales role? I know, like, I can't imagine sales is very different from the world of tech, where you get a lot of people show up with a lot of energy, only last an average of 3 years at a company because it's just so strenuous. I'd imagine for certain personality types in particular, getting 2 to 500 no go fuck yourselves a day might be kind of a rough experience, especially first
Yeah.
starting out.
Yeah, no, fair point. And I think it depends on the company's culture, how likely anyone would be to burn out because there are still sales companies where you're really just like in a fucking pig pen and you are set to just make 200 cold calls every single day and your life is miserable and they order in pizza so that you can't leave your desk and it's like a manipulative thing. I've heard these stories firsthand from people. And there you're not going to last a year. Like it's a high churn environment. Don't work for those companies. Go on Glassdoor. Never join a company that has less than 3-star review. um, that would be one way to avoid that calamity. Whereas the last two companies I worked at, And I feel like there's quite a few companies like this. It's a very low stress environment. You know, as long as you hit your number, it was results only. And I like that as like an organization structure or culture, because some people can sit down and make 20 phone calls and then from that hit their quota because they're just that talented, or they're that good at following up with the few leads that they do get. And like, that's amazing. And if they don't want to push themselves, yeah, like that's too bad for them, but they are doing the job that's expected of you. So be it. On the other hand, if you really want to crush it and thrive in those types of environments, the bar is so low that if as a young person you want to come in and just like take over the team, you have the opportunity to do that. So there's a lot of sales companies that are the results only work environment, and those you really don't burn out. It's just a matter of like, do you like the culture and do you find it valuable to stick around?
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, we have one last question for you, or rather, I have one last question for you. When and why to leave a company in a sales environment? Because, there are a lot of times when, in all industries, when it is legitimately time to quit your job.
Yeah.
But when that moment comes can really depend on sort of the specific ins and outs of different industries. So that's one I kind of like to ask people across the board.
Hmm. Yeah. I think in sales, it's dependent on a few factors. One is your value as a salesperson and your skill. If you're a highly skilled salesperson, you're in demand, and you shouldn't put up with much bullshit at all in any kind of company, because you can just hop right on over to someone else who wants to pay you six figures to make them seven figures. Um, However, if you're new, you still want to follow the same general trends that you would even if you were in a different department. Um, is the company having a bright future? Are they receptive to employee feedback? If not, after a certain point, these things are going to stack up in your head to the point where you might start thinking about quitting. If you notice that your morale is bad, even after discussing it with supervisors for like more than a couple of months, I would start looking, just like no matter what. And then in sales, one thing in particular that you have to look out for are changes to the commission structure. If you're in a company that's changing the compensation plan like every 3 months, like that's bad. Like once a year is kind of like is doable, but it can also piss some people off. Twice a year is a red flag. More than that is these guys don't know what they're doing, and there's a high likelihood that you're going to get screwed over. So
Yeah.
like seriously think about leaving.
A business that changes its policy like quarterly is a business that's going bankrupt.
Yeah. Agreed.
Like,
Agreed.
that's true of any administration position. That means their original plan didn't work and the subsequent ones aren't patching the holes.
Hmm.
Alrighty. Well, on that note, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to going back through this and taking some notes. And have a wonderful afternoon.
All right, man. It was a pleasure.